located at 3621 North McCord Road. The Zoning Commission members have a variety of different documents in front of them, including a zoning staff report, various site plans and applications, and a report from the Lucas County Planning Commission, and something from the Sylvania Township Fire Department. I'll note for the record before we start that both the Sylvania Township Zoning Staff Report and the Toledo-Lucas County Plan Commission has recommended approval of this zone change. Please note that Mr. King has joined us and that the Sylvania Township Fire Department has written a letter to the extent that they have no issues with the project as presented. I know obviously there are many people here who would like to comment on this proposal, but what I'm going to ask first of all, if the people who are proposing the request for the zone change would like to speak and address the Zoning Commission, and then we'll give everybody else a chance to address that. Unless you have anything you want to add at this time?
No, just anything I have is in the staff report and on the PowerPoint.
Okay. Well, we need to go through the PowerPoint first of all, or?
Well, it's going through now.
Okay.
It's basically just items of note from the staff report.
Okay. Well, then let's let the developers address the Zoning Commission. And state your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Don Feller with Feller Finch & Associates, 1683 Woodlands Drive, Wyoming, Ohio. We're the engineers for this project. As you can see and as you know, it's located on the west side of McCord Road, just north of the bike trail. As you mentioned, this project has been recommended for approval by both the Lucas County Planning Commission and the Sylvania Township zoning staff. A couple of things I wanted to point out. The proposed project basically consists of 4 buildings. Each building have 2 units, like a duplex type unit, but 4 buildings, and as you can see on the site plans, they're 3,200 square foot footprint, which is not a lot different than a large house. Okay. This project, as you know, is currently zoned R1, and previously, as you know, as you mentioned, I think, this project had been a actually similar project with 8 units, had previously been approved by the Sylvania Township a few years ago, I think 2002, if I'm not mistaken. A very similar type of project that was approved for a PUD with the 4 buildings, 2-unit buildings, just very similar to this back then. That project never did proceed, so the PUD zoning expired, and the township, I think, subsequently to that, rezoned that to R1. R1, as the property is currently zoned, would allow for the development of 4 single-family lots. So if this project wasn't developed in this manner, it could be developed into 4 single-family homes with 4 driveways out on the McCord Road. So as far as the number of buildings and whatnot on this property, it would be not a lot different than from a visible standpoint, I guess what I'm looking at, than what you would have under the current zoning if it was developed as otherwise. As you know, the project does comply with the master plan, and I think bottom line, I guess that's all I really have to mention. Again, I just want to reiterate this project, a very similar project, was previously approved by the township. But with that, I'd just be glad to answer any questions you might have.
I'd like to mention something.
Sure.
There is one variance, for lack of a better word, from the zoning resolution that does apply here. There's a 100-foot setback from center line to McCord Road. This PUD is looking at a 80-foot setback for the 2 frontmost buildings.
And I would, along those lines, I'd point out that with a planned unit development, when you're approving, as you know, when you approve a planned unit development, you're approving the plan, which does allow for variations in the setbacks and whatnot. And I should point out, R1 would allow for example, 7-foot setbacks on the side yards, which is basically real similar to what many of the homes in the adjoining subdivision has, is 7-foot side yards with basically 15 feet between the houses in many cases. This one, for example, on the north side, we're proposing a little over 11-foot setback at the very minimum. It actually gets a little bit more than that as you go toward McCord Road due to the angle in the property line. The rear yard is a 30-foot setback as allowed by the R3 zoning. Typically in R1 it would be 35, so it's not a large variance from what would be allowed under R1 zoning. So the setbacks are basically similar on the north and actually more than what you would have with an R1 development. Yeah.
Any questions from members of the zoning commission?
Darrell, is that setback waiver, we'll call it something, is granted by the trustees?
The McCord Road,
Yeah.
well, that's part of the PUD plan, so if this were to be approved, it would be approved with that, with all those setbacks.
The PUD allows some variance from them.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you sparked one question. So as the property is currently zoned, and we know it's been through a little tangled history here for the last 6 or 8 years, if we did nothing, somebody could go in and build 4 houses there and do 4 curb cuts, if they
Right.
wanted to put the money into it. And they'd never come to the zoning commission, never do anything, but that would be feasible the way it currently sits for
And
whoever
they-
owns the land.
Right, and they can have a minimum of 7 feet for the side setbacks.
And it would never come to us or to the trustees because
No.
it's already zoned that way.
Right,
So this allows for basically the same number of units, but keeps 1 curb cut.
same number of buildings.
Same number of buildings, as
Right,
versus
so
4
units.
houses, yeah.
Right.
You're actually having 8 units
Yes,
instead of 4
yes.
houses.
Right,
4 buildings, but 8 units.
Yeah,
but you're correct, one curb cut instead of 4.
okay.
And the other thing I should mention is that one thing, the configuration of this proposed development does sort of focus all of the traffic into the middle, so it's in essence screened from the traffic, the interior traffic of the development is screened from the adjoining properties due to the layout.
And each building is 3,200 and then half of it,
3,200 square foot footprint, each one is 1,600 square foot footprint.
okay.
Obviously,
And they're
they're
gonna be 2-story units?
2-story, story and a half, I guess, type of unit, yeah.
Any other?
I should mention, one change that was made since the original submittal was to revise it to provide for 2-car garages instead of 1-car garages as were originally submitted. We've also added some additional screening around the north and the west side of the property.
Any other questions?
One question, and he may not know the answer, it might be a question for the county, with the turn lane, would you share the left turn lane heading northbound with the subdivision entrance? Or would these people have to stop on McCord to turn left, waiting for oncoming traffic? Obviously, we don't have any drawings of McCord Road, but I just came by the property, and that's not a real, I don't know if they would extend the turn lane. That's my question.
I can't answer that for the county. I mean, it's possible they might extend the turn lane, with the fact, though, that I think, if I'm not mistaken, McCord Road was recently improved with a center turn lane. I suspect that with the amount of traffic that would be generated, which is fairly minimal, that might be sufficient. What happens is, if this is approved, then we go into we have to do the actual design and get the site plan approved, which then the county would say, yeah, you need a turn lane, no, you don't. I can't speak for them. I suspect, though, that with the type of traffic this would generate, the center turn lane is probably sufficient.
And the planning commission had recommended like 31 conditions. I assume those are all being met?
Oh, yes, we have to meet all those conditions. Yeah. Those conditions are generally, we see them in any submittal we do, they're pretty much the same.
Just to note that. It was one of the longer lists I'd seen recently.
Oh, I've seen a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
Number 17 on that list is from the Lucas County engineer, and it states, The proposed access to McCord Road shall follow the requirements of the Lucas County Access Management Regulations. An access permit application shall be submitted to the Lucas County Engineer's Office for review and approval.
It's getting kind of tight towards the bike lane, you know what I mean? So there's going to be, I guess, like I said, the county, that's in their hands, I guess.
Right.
But
Any other questions before we let other people speak? Okay. I would guess that some of you are here to talk to us. So if you could take your turn and go to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. And we'll ask you to try to keep your comments reasonably brief. We won't set a time limit. But, we do have, it looks like we're going to have a number of people who want to address.
Good evening. My name is Denny Valerius. I live at 3611 Swallowtail Lane, which in the photo on the screen is the home directly behind the property there. The rear setback of my property shares probably 80% of the rear setback of the property that we're discussing here. I oppose the change from R1 to R3 for the following reasons. I feel that it is a considerably higher density of units per acre than the surrounding subdivision. I know we've made comparables to the surrounding subdivisions in general, considering Farmbrook and Sylvan Woods and some other neighborhoods, but the small area that is Monarch Meadows, which is only 35 homes, which basically the site is essentially recessed into, is a series of larger homes on larger lots. My property is almost a full acre directly behind this, and there's one home on it. While I do have one of the larger lots in the subdivision, a lot of the other lots, including the adjacent homeowners, have lots that are, close to a half an acre or in excess of half an acre. They're not the 5 and 6 units per acre like we're currently talking about. So I feel like this particular area is a little more upscale than if you were to take the whole surrounding area as a whole. I also feel that the R3 zoning designation, if you were to look at what's on the screen here currently, there is no R3 around. Everything is R1. There's some A4 across the street. There is nothing of this density in the surrounding area. And the density becomes even greater when you consider the fact that there's a 50-foot Toledo Edison easement on the south side of this property. The actual buildable portion of the property is only a hair over, well, the entire site is 1.4. The actual buildable portion due to the easement is only a hair over 1 acre. And we're talking about putting in 8 dwellings, or possibly 16 people residing there into that small space. I feel that density of units per acre does affect the adjacent homeowners and lots, including myself, with a great amount of noise. I feel like the parking is also not sufficient. There is no off-site parking. There is no street parking available. I would point out on the street. Some of the other comparables like we're talking about have additional parking for these units. The driveways total are 30 feet wide on the proposed plan, which is only 15 feet per driveway. That's not enough room to put 2 cars side by side per unit. Any parking there would have to be 1 car in front of the other, or as you see here, would be no room to fit 2 cars in there. 15 feet is not enough room to park 2 cars side by side, or 4 cars across the entire space. So parking, I feel like, would become a problem. It was pointed out that that parking overflow would not spill over into the adjacent subdivision because there's no access, and that is true. However, I just feel it would lead to a situation where you would have a lot of cars trying to fit in there, no additional parking for them, even for visitors, and it would just become a situation where it would not be, it would become messy and not congruent with the surrounding neighborhood, and it would just be a sore spot. And then ultimately, I oppose the variance in the 100-foot setback is required by McCord Road. Obviously, they have to have that in order to fit this many units on this property. If they had to abide by the 100-foot setback, there is no way you could fit this many units. I basically just feel that it's too many, or my opinion is that it's too many units for the space. I would also like to point out that I do not oppose the development of this property. Development of this property underneath the current R1 zoning designation of single-family homes, even if it was 4 of them, would be, I think, perfectly acceptable to myself and many of the neighbors who are also surrounded by single-family homes. It's a single-family neighborhood, and that's what we're all used to, and I think that would be acceptable, and I feel like this is not. So that is why I oppose that, and ultimately, I guess, I feel like it affects the homeowner's values. I have, again, a large home on a large lot that I just purchased in the past few years, and, even if we just say, hey, this is going to affect the value of the surrounding homes, maybe even 10% or so, I'm not prepared to take a loss of value on my property of $30,000 or $40,000 due to the fact that I'm surrounded now by a development like this that is R3. And I guess my opinion would be to see it stay as R1. I also went around and spoke with many of the members of the surrounding neighborhood, and I did obtain signed statements from 29 of the surrounding homeowners who all live within 100 yards of this property, and they all oppose any change from R1 to R3 also. If you want to take that into consideration or would like to review these, you're welcome to. Thank you. Any questions?
Who else would like to address the zoning commission? Again, name and address.
Diane Christ, 6715 Sweet Bush Court. Our property is on the north side of this property. And I guess I have a couple things to mention. I don't know, this driveway that they want to put in for this 16 vehicles that could possibly be there is only approximately 100 feet from the bike trail. It's very difficult to get out on Monarch at peak traffic times. Traffic backs up at the bike trail. Many of us have seen people hit coming off the bike trail, not even at that light, but further down because they're trying to get across because of all the traffic. So I think that is a big issue. Even if there's a turn lane, there won't be a place for them to have 4 or 5 cars to back up from that light at the University Bike Trails to be able to turn into that development. The other thing is, on the north side of the property, they have stated that that is a side yard. Well, in the R3 PUD, Article 1003, they state that you are supposed to have a 40-foot setback on all rear properties. When Monarch Meadows was platted and zoned out, every house that abuts this lot is a rear yard. My property, if they only go 80 feet back, is going to be hit with a building that's only 18 feet at one point from my property line and only a little over 11 feet between my house and my neighbor's backyard. And they're planning on putting evergreens there, 6-foot evergreens. If you're used to any kind of landscaping, to put a 6-foot evergreen, you're not going to be able to put it right on that property line. You're going to have to set it out. They're talking about evergreens that are going to be growing into these houses or duplexes, whatever it is that they want to build. So in the end, they probably won't end up being there because they're going to get in the way of the properties and they will have to cut them down. And I really don't think that the traffic and everything, they haven't even done a traffic study on McCord Road since 2008. I don't know if I'm sure you're all aware, there is a big senior apartment complex unit going in just south of Sylvania Avenue, just past the Advent Lutheran Church. They're taking out 3 houses, and they're putting a huge senior apartment complex in there. Now, when I talked to the county, they said they couldn't count that traffic, or what that would do to the traffic on McCord Road from Sylvania Avenue to the University Bikes Trail, because it isn't built. But it is being readied to go under construction. It has already been approved. And I think that's something you have to take in consideration. If they haven't done a study since 2008, and traffic by far has gone up since 2008 in this area, especially with the bike trail, then you're going to put the senior housing complex in there, and you're just adding more fuel to the fire in that stretch of McCord Road. And also, I agree with Denny, it is all R1, single family. I would prefer to have single family houses there than I would to have. When it was first sent out to us, it was going to be a rental property. Then they said, well, it might be condos. I don't think that's good enough for us. I really think that this is a family neighborhood. We've lived in our house since it was built. It's over 20 years old. We lived in Farmbrook before that. We've been in Sylvania for over 30 years. And we stay in this area because it was a good place for our family and for children. But it seems that every little lot there is opens up and somebody wants to throw in as many condos or apartments that they can. And the reason is they say, well, that's the only way we can make money. Well, we do have to think about the families, the people and the homeowners that live there too. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Who else would like to address the zoning commission?
Yeah, my name is Joe Badian. I live at 6729 Sweet Bush Court. So on the picture, I would be in the northwest corner up there, kind of adjacent to the property. I'm just going to reiterate, I think, what Denny and Diane said. It's a, Monarch Meadows are good-sized lots. It's primarily, it is private family homes. I think it's fair to say with the work that Denny's done and gone around and talked to the homeowners and done a lot of nice homework, that 29 of the 35 units oppose this. I'm coming more from a general overview, macro viewpoint of, I think we bought in that area because it was a good community for private residence homes. Number two is I'm very concerned about the density of the units, as you can tell by the statistics and the measurements. Just imagine putting those 8 units in there, and for the parking and the setbacks and everything, you're literally in the backyards of 4 or 5 of those property owners. I don't think we ever bought with the intention of having that. Reaffirming what Denny said, I don't have any concern about development. It's fact of life. Development's not a problem, but I personally oppose this rezoning, and I think as R1, it's fine. I am concerned about my property value. I know nothing about the value of these units that are going to be put in there. Originally, I was told the same thing that Diane was told, that it was rental property. By its nature, it can be more transient. You're not going to have that stable property base and people in the community like you might have with the single-family homes. And then finally, as a safety concern, that is a significant amount of traffic that goes on McCord, as you can imagine, north and south. It's very difficult to come out of Monarch Meadows. And now to the other gentleman's question about the turnabout, that's a really good question. I think that's going to cause further problems, as let's say you potentially talk about 16 cars in that area, plus visitors in that area. I think we have a safety concern. And at the end of the day, I'm more concerned about the safety of the individuals and things of that nature. So when I saw the diagram of this, I have to be honest with you, to me it looks like encroachment almost on the property of certainly 5 or 6 homeowners that buttress up against that property. And again, to Denny's point, I don't think it's going to be very good for the property values. And so I'm the same way as Denny and Diane. R1, no problem. Private residence, keep it safe, no concerns about that. But I think the way this diagram is put forward and the impact on the homeowners and primarily safety, that I would oppose the implementation of this R3. Thank you.
Who else would like to address?
I'm sorry, if I could just make one more point that I wanted to make.
Sure.
Before Jerry speaks here. There has been a point that's been made many times about the previous history of this property and the way it was other PUDs that have been previously approved. It's my understanding that back in 2004 there was a PUD approved for this property for a similar 8-unit development. However, I think it's well worth pointing out that the zoning resolution has changed since 2004. You know, back in 2004 there was no minimum number of units per acre requirement. So back in 2004, you know, could you put 8 units on R1? I believe that was probably the case. Since then, there's a minimum number of units per acre requirement that's in the current zoning resolution, and since that has changed, I don't believe that should be a consideration. I mean, the current zoning resolution is not the same zoning resolution that was in place 10 years ago, and with those changes, I don't believe you can use that to say that since it was approved once before, it should be approved again, because the resolution today is not what it was 10 years ago. So I hope that's, you know, something that's should be considered.
State your name and address.
I'm Jerry Levison. I'm the Vice President of Monarch Meadows, a homeowners association. I've lived in the development since Monarch Meadows became a development. I was the second or third home that was built in there. We've gone through the same type of PUD baloney in the past. There's 2 lots directly north of Monarch Meadows that are currently about 2.5 acres each. If this PUD goes through, those 2 lots will become a PUD, and the plans were about 10, 12 years ago to put in 25 units back there. If we open this can of worms up, we're going to have another problem adjacent to this subdivision on the north side. And I don't believe you want to go through the same thing all over again. I know I don't. We had lawyers, we had several meetings with the people here. I went through to the trustees, and it was voted down at that point in time. The other thing is, PUD, what does that mean? Does that mean that you can avoid any of the setbacks that are within the neighborhood at the present time? Can somebody explain that to me? Anybody here?
PUD, planned unit development, allows the developer to basically custom make.
In other words, throw out all the other zoning that's been in
Well, no,
effect.
this would be an R3 PUD, so it would.
So we can avoid all the setbacks that are within the 35 or 36 units that are in our development. We can throw those out, because if I wanted to build on the back of my house, I can't do it because it's right on the 35 or 40-foot line plus the Edison setback there. So that eliminates any remodeling on any of the homes on Monarch, on the north side of our homes. Is that what you're telling me?
I would have to look at the homes on Monarch.
They were all built according to code, and the developer of our area has tried unsuccessfully several times to buy this property.
Darrell, I think what he's asking is, I mean, your current property is zoned a certain way. This zoning, yes, the rules are different for this zoning.
Why?
The PUD process, or I guess the point of a PUD was to allow the development there, if I'm misunderstanding.
So they could cheat on
No, there's.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
No, it's to allow a little bit more customization and a little bit of
Well,
flexibility.
you're still far and above the amount of units that are.
Sir, boards before us and trustees before us have all approved these PUD zoning classifications. So that's not for us to debate. We're not debating that. What we're trying to figure out is the request reasonable for the property? And the current zoning laws we have, we can't change those right now.
Okay, so according to the amount of space that is in there, I think 6 maybe would fit in there according to the zoning. Is that correct?
The current zoning would allow 4.
Okay.
For houses.
If we went to PUD, I think we could live probably with 6 units in there, but not 8. You folks agree? Well, that's it, but I don't think we have a chance at this point in time.
Well, sure we do. If they follow the setbacks by the law.
By the law.
If you step back 100 feet, you take away the 50 feet of Toledo Edison easement, and you do the 40 feet along the west and north side, you're only looking at a buildable property that's 233.34 feet wide by 104.42 deep. That's where the problem lies. The property is wider than it is deep, and to be able to follow those setbacks, the laws in Article 222 and 1003, they don't really have enough room to put the 8 buildings there. And that's why they want to have the R3 PUD and ask for all these variances. They don't want to go as far back as 100, and they don't want to be 40 feet off of the west and north side properties.
So you agree that the PUD means they can do damn well what they please?
When they PUD, then they're going to ask everybody, and if they all work together or whatever, then they'll all say, okay, sure.
So what's the basis of the reduction in the setback? Because if you do that, then you create a precedence for reducing.
I'm going to ask you, if you're finished, why don't you come up and give your name so we don't just turn this into a, I mean, we're here to listen, not necessarily to have a conversation.
Okay. My name is David Freitas. I'm at 6719 Monarch Drive. And my question to you and my statement to you would be, once you create a precedent in any sort of thing, I know this well because that's what I do for a living, law. Once you create a precedent, you allow somebody else to look at that precedent and say, well, if it was good for me, it's good for you. If it's good for you, it's good for the next guy. So once you create an allowance and you create a situation where something is set back less than 100 feet, you'll create for the next person to come in to create perhaps 8 when there should only be 6 on the property, created in a small area. I remember back then I think it was 10 acres, or I think it was 10 acres for a PUD, then it went down to 5 acres, and then it was smaller and smaller, and then they kept doing it. And what they're doing is they're trying to build on it to create a smaller and smaller area, a dimension, to put a higher density of home or residential area in there in order to create profitability. That's what it comes down to. You have to create a certain density to make it worthwhile to put the property into place. When you have Monarch Meadows, which are individual properties, each approximately 80 feet wide, each approximately 123, 125 feet deep, you have single-family homes that roughly run from about, I think the smallest of the ranch is about 2,000 feet or so, up to approximately, I think the largest one is the double-acre lot. I think it's about 3,600 feet. Am I correct about the footage? And you had valuations in there that at one point in time, before your time, were up to close to well over $300,000. Most houses, including mine, was up over $250,000. Now you come in and what you do is you create a precedence by reducing the setback, and then you allow higher density. You create smaller units of less value, perhaps an entirely different person that's looking at that neighborhood. You have a different kind of person that's looking for residential property at that point. You're looking maybe at somebody who's coming from either less income to be able to purchase that property, which in itself isn't troubling, except that when you start bringing the lower income house into the area, you then do reflect that value in the price of all the rest of the homes in the neighborhood. You're taking down the valuation by reducing the amount of property that is being used, and therefore the size of the homes, the valuation of the homes, and therefore you're going to ultimately have to reduce the scale of how well built those homes are actually going to be, because nobody's going to pay a lot of money for a small home or a greater price for the home equal to the valuation of the homes that were built originally in Monarch Meadows. That's simply not going to happen. And the higher density you do that, the more houses you put in there, the more you're going to push. You're allowing the developer to create more money per unit by having more units in there. Even if they get less per unit, rather, they're going to get more because they're going to have a higher density. But you're going to reduce the actual quality per each unit, and that's going to bring the valuation of each of those 8 units that are proposed down, which ultimately is going to reflect in the valuation of the single units, the single-family units that were created as part of the idea that set up the original Monarch Meadows development. And that is not in the design plan that was originally set up for that whole area of Monarch Meadows. Then you have the wetlands area. That we even tried to get into the wetland area. We couldn't because you have to buy back extra land for that. That would have allowed the original developer to have created extra room to be able to have expanded Monarch Meadows. We couldn't do that because we had to buy extra land back. And again, it was ineffective cost to the developer to do that because they couldn't get enough back per unit based on the space that was in there, and that prevented them from taking that area because, again, unless they reduced the acreage requirements and allowed them to increase the density, he would not have been able to have made the money in that wetland area. Okay, the same thing's happening here. It wasn't economically feasible to put fewer buildings on that wetland area because they were buying more but getting less land. They couldn't increase the number of units because then it wouldn't have been like the rest of Monarch Meadows. But the few number of units that were there, they couldn't have made enough money. Therefore, the property was priced too high, and thus no attempt was made to get the wetland area. It's the same thing's happening here. He has to increase the number of units put on that land in order to get the money out of the property. Just like when they tried several years back by trying to increase it by putting all the extra, they went from the PUD to trying to expand it to the number of units, I think it was like 34 units or something like that they were going to build. And tried to expand that, because he figured that if he made each one narrower, put more buildings in there, then he could make profitability and be able to do that. But it takes it out of the original design mode of the entire neighborhood. And once you restructure that neighborhood, you restructure the values. Once you restructure the values, you take down the values of all these people that paid good money for their houses, which have already, I might point out to the trustees here, that have already taken a huge dip in valuation. These people bought these properties and figuring that the properties would go up in value, and they've taken a huge sink. And now they're just starting to come back in valuation, and what you want to do is bring something into the neighborhood and take that valuation down permanently. And what you're going to have is people coming into the neighborhood that will not pay that valuation, properties will sink, and ultimately the revenues of this area will go down because the valuations will go down. That hurts the bottom line, which is the pocket of Saline. It's going to just hit the bottom pocket right here. That's not in the best interest of this community. It's not in the best interest of this residential area.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to add anything to this discussion before we discuss?
Hi, I'm Sharon Bedian. I'm at 6729 Sweetbush Court. We're also adjacent to the property. I agree with all the things my neighbors have said pretty much here today. I just want to give you a little different perspective. I know we all have our individual perspective. I'm a mom, Diane's a mom. We're all family people here. I just want to tell you a little bit about the neighborhood we have that's Monarch Meadows. It's a beautiful little neighborhood. Sylvania Township should be very proud of it. It is small. We have a wide variety of people. We have very young families with preschoolers all the way up to our retirees, and we all get along really, really well. We've all voluntarily entered into covenants with Monarch Meadows when we bought our properties. Things such as we all have the same type of fencing. There's one type of fencing allowed. We have that or we have nothing. It's our choice. But it looks very, very nice. We have rules about not parking RVs or boats in our driveways or on our streets just because we think it's better for the entire neighborhood. We all do it. We have things about not having even our garbage cans visible from the streets, except, of course, on trash day. We have one trash day, so they're all out on one day, and every other day they're all put away somewhere, either behind our garage, inside our garage, or wherever else that's not visible. I just wanted to give you a little flavor of the neighborhood. It's a really nice neighborhood. You guys should all be really proud of it. It's really, really nice. You can drive through there anytime. And like I said, we have a wide variety of people, but we all get along really well together. And I think that's one of our concerns. We just want to keep what we have. We want to keep our property values. We want to keep our neighborhood. We want to keep the neighbors we have because we like each other. We all like each other, even though we have a huge variety of ages, for instance, and probably everything else. But it's a wonderful place to live. And we don't want to get rid of that. We don't want to lose our property values. We've lived there personally 19 years, and I know a lot of these people have lived there a lot longer. We're proud of our places, and we hope you're proud of it too for us. And we just don't want anything in there that's going to, like we said, decrease our property values or in any way impinge upon, the quiet we have. It's a wonderfully quiet place. If you want to sleep in the morning, you can. I mean, occasionally we've had teenagers in the neighborhoods, all we have to do is talk to the parents. The parents take care of it. It's a wonderful little place to live. So, Saturdays and Sundays, quiet. It's nice all the time. Little kids playing outside, they're wonderful little kids. They're not loud. It's a great place. And I think that's one of our big concerns. If we have, if we change the zoning and we have a much higher density, that's not going to happen anymore. We're very, very close. All of us here are very, very close. We're all going to hear everything that goes on in the property. So I just wanted to let you know from the livability perspective, that's another of our major concerns. Thank you.
Is anybody else before we?
I'll keep it quick. Richard Chris, 6715 Sweetbush Court. The only thing I really want to point out is the fact that if you look at this right here, this is my yard right here. This is approximately 18 feet, and down here over here it's 10 feet. Now they say this is a side yard. If I'm looking at this, that's their backyard. It's my backyard. And it's, they're supposed to have 40 feet, both supposed to have 40 feet, but they keep referring to it as a side yard. I know it's a side of the lot, but that's a backyard. So that's my big thing right there. I want to make sure that you got it heard again. Thanks.
My name is Mike White. I own the Buckeye Real Estate Group. My address is 7596 Kings Point in Sylvania. I'm the person that is trying to develop this property and will be the builder of the property. I've listened to these concerns, and I just want to address a few of them. First of all, it is not a rental property, and that is not my desire for this. My desire is to build these 8 units and sell them. I guess at the end of the day, I would have the ability to rent them, but that is not what I'm trying to do here, much like I assume they could probably rent their house if they chose to as well. I think if you see the picture of the elevation, I'm not doing it cheaply. I'm not cutting corners. I'm constructing a high-quality home here with stone on the elevation, a 2-car garage, so both units, or potentially both cars can be put into the garage. So I know that was a concern. I just want to make sure that, I want to point out that this was part of the master plan of Sylvania. I know that, or Sylvania Township. I know that recently I've heard a lot of talking about Sylvania Township and having places for their aging population to stay. And I understand there's a concern of that. The type of person that I presume that would buy this from me is in the aging population. I don't see families with children coming in here. I just finished a subdivision called Legacy Village of Forest Lakes off of Bancroft and Centennial. Built similar type units to what I'm presenting here, although they are not sharing a common wall. By far, the majority of the people that were purchasing the homes were 60 and above, empty nester kind of situation. I presume that is going to be my same type of purchaser here. As far as values go, I've looked at the last 4 home sales and on Zillow, and the prices range from a low of $134,500 to a high of $185,000, with an average price of $163,000. So when I hear that they're concerned on the property values, I look at the dilapidated house that was there a few years ago before it was pulled down. That would concern me as a homeowner in a budding neighborhood. Once I have these units there, I'll be the first to say we'll make some noise building these, but I'll keep a clean site and keep that as well controlled as I can. But once it's done, it's going to be a quiet setting. It's not going to be, a college dorm. Also, to think about parking and cars, if this was if this stayed as the zoning currently is and built 4 houses there, I think about my own home right now with 4 cars, soon to be 5 cars coming and going with college age and high school age children. If each one of those residential single-family homes each had 4 or 5 cars, you might potentially have more than what I'm talking about here. So, I just wanted to point that out as well. Understand, if I understood properly, one gentleman said, I'm going to have to cut corners and such. My plan is granite countertops, hardwood flooring, energy-efficient homes, which from a standpoint of comparison, I'll stack my home up, a new construction home as far as energy efficiencies go, against homes of older value. I'm not trying to come here and steal from these people. I'm trying to build a solid, long-term, well-maintained, efficient facility for our aging population to move into. Thank you for your time.
Just a couple of things I wanted to address. First of all, I want to say I think Monarch Meadows is a very nice development too, but I'm biased because I designed it, so and it turned out well. One of the points things I want to address was she mentioned a 40-foot setback required. I just want to point out, under R1 zoning, they require a side yard setback of 7 feet, a rear yard setback of 35 feet. R3 zoning requires a side yard setback of 10 feet and a rear yard setback of 30 feet. The plan unit development section requires, under the residential section, if it's abutting a commercial district, it has to have a 40-foot setback, but only if it's abutting a commercial district. If a commercial use was in here, next to a residential district, they have to have a 40-foot setback. So I'm not sure where the 40-foot setback came from. I don't quite understand that. One thing I want to point out is, this is most likely, I'm sure, an empty nester type development, people my age looking to downsize or whatever. When we do a development like this, we have to do traffic studies, traffic impact evaluations, and we're required to use the American Association of State Highway Officials traffic counts. They have books that say the counts you have to use for the type of development. Those counts are developed from actual counts of actual developments and then average them out. A single-family development such as Monarch Meadows generates 10 trips a day. A trip is a car leaving is a trip, a car returning is a trip. A development such as this, the standard is 6 trips per day, so it's a little more than half the trips that a Monarch Meadows type development use. The other thing you find in looking at the traffic impact is on a development like this, an empty nester type development like this, the traffic comes and goes at different times, whereas the peak hour traffic on a Monarch Meadows might be 7 to 8, 7 to 9. On a development like this, it's usually, they don't have that peak hour, people going to work type of traffic. So the traffic impact is actually somewhat less on a development like this than it is on a standard single-family development. Let's see what else. And I have to tell you, I've been doing this business for 40 years now and done a lot of zoning changes like this. And every zoning change I ever go to, I always hear the same thing, that it's going to reduce the property values. And I've done studies on developments similar to this that we have done and evaluated property sales before and after the development. And I've yet to find one where property values went down on this type of development adjacent to single-family homes. I think if you study it, you'll find that's the case, because these are going to be quality homes with a significant value. I really don't feel it about having impact on property values. As far as the noise, I mean, as Mr. White said, these are empty nesters going to be living there. It's not a college dormitory. It won't be any noisier than people in Monarch Meadows. And quite frankly, they may find these are nice neighbors. They might become friends with these people that live here, actually, because they will be their neighbors.
Okay?
I think that's it.
Okay. Unless anybody has anything substantially new to add, I think we're going to move to talking among the members of the commission.
I have one question. Are they going to market this as a 55 and older? Because unless they are going to do that, there's no way to guarantee if they will be able to sell these to older people, because there's already a huge senior apartment complex going in right down the street. Why would they have to buy there if they can go to this huge senior complex that's going in?
And also, I'd like to point out one other thing. And that is that if you use the comparable value of these properties now, and they build something, even if it's comparable, and I get, admittedly, I wasn't here for a while, because I don't know what the actual price he's planning to list these at. But even if they were to use the 185, which I believe actually was my next door neighbor that sold. Yeah, but, and 134, there was one that went in foreclosure. So these are artificial during a very bad period of time. These houses, my house, for example, was valued at $60,000, $70,000 more than it was. And in fact, the price he's talking about is less than I paid for it 20 years ago. So my concern would be if you build something based upon the price that it was worth.
I gotcha.
That's not, you're putting something.
We all understand about the real estate market. Gary, you were about to say something?
I just wanted to clear up the misconception about colony apartments that are coming in on McCord Road, they are not senior apartments, they are just apartments, multifamily dwelling. And just kind of also reiterate as far as the changing demographics, the baby boomers and the millennials, the two largest generations, both are looking for homes of smaller footprint, higher density, and we have quite a shortage of that in Sylvania Township. And looking ahead to the future with the aging infrastructure, we're going to want that tax base here of the higher density offers. The days of the McMansion are gone, or at least not going to be back for a long, long time. So it's for the Sylvania area as a whole, this is definitely a plus. I also wanted to add regarding parking, the requirement is 2 per dwelling. So this development meets it with the garages alone, meet the 2 per dwelling, and then any parking on the driveway or the access drive would be additional parking.
Let's throw it open to the members of the zoning commission who would like to ask any questions or offer any thoughts.
What do you anticipate the initial asking price of these units to be?
I'm still developing is the correct square footage versus the sales price. I would say somewhere in the 170 to 190 range.
Any other questions or comments that people would like to make?
I just have a couple comments, just maybe more so discussion for us about, kind of our guiding light in this process with the master land use plan. In those higher corridors of traffic in busier areas that have been identified in the plan, there's a call for transitional zoning. That's somewhat exactly what the PUD is trying to address, with a little bit of variation, with a little bit more flexibility, without as rigid of zoning. That's not meant to cheat the system, but to give a little bit more flexibility for the rebuilding of the current area. Some of these properties wouldn't conform to some of the old zoning. So, in looking at some of the trends and going up to that property to the north that we've recently approved for this type of transitional use, though the R1 surrounding this is, it's R1's prevalent. When you look down the corridor and we look forward in the future, the PUD on that Sylvania Avenue corridor seems to be a little bit more consistent with what, not what we've done, but what the laws or what our land use plan has been presented. So, though change is always difficult, it seems like the way that McCord, not Sylvania, I'm sorry, the McCord Road corridor is going with the traffic is that you almost want a buffer in some transitional. This housing development doesn't seem like it's certainly not low income or crack housing by any stretch. And not saying that I'm advocating, just kind of making open comments from what I've heard. So,
any other comments?
I just want to add, looking at the old R1 residential that it is, he does have an option for permanently sited manufactured homes, which not a mobile home by any means, but a cheap way to develop 4 lots. And I think if he did that would lower or cheapen up the neighborhood. But that's his option. He's approved to do that as we speak with 4 driveways. So just to be careful what you wish for, and that's kind of what we dealt with 6 months ago on this larger apartment complex. And the PUD, I wouldn't say, it's very controversial. Some townships don't have it. but the developers do old-fashioned, straight zoning, no landscape buffers, no ponds. So if you talk to the development world, it's kind of a new ballgame where they want to work with the township and the community for, I guess you would call it cleaner, better transition, like John said, flowing subdivisions with walking trails and trees. Because if this just stays R4, they don't have to plant any buffers. He could just plop 4 manufactured homes in there on a crawl space, relatively cheap, I would imagine, and flip the things for $100,000. I mean, I didn't look at areas to see what he's into this property for. It doesn't matter. That's his business. But there's a relatively cheap and quick way to flip this property too, and that's unfortunately what you guys are up against. I mean, that's the game these guys are in. And does this look a little tight to me with 8? Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I do understand what she's saying about the trees planted fairly close, but they're not going to be close to your property. They're going to be close to the people that buy these, so it's kind of their issue. But yeah, that's the thing with the PUD. If you don't get that, and he does straight zoning, then you're on your own with trees, landscaping, fencing, whatever to separate you from this. Where if they do the PUD, and Darrell tells them that they have to have a fence or bushes or a rock or whatever they say is on the plan, then they have to do it. That's just my thoughts, I guess.
Any other comments or thoughts? Am I the only person here? This is the second time go around for this piece of property. Were you around, John?
Yeah, I think I was here.
Yeah, John and I, this is our, we think, I know it's my second time around with the piece of property. Yeah.
One last comment?
One last, that's it.
Just, Mr. White, I'm familiar with your business, and you do build beautiful homes. I don't think there's any debate here about the quality of the work that you do or what you're going, and your intention is to put out there. I think the biggest concern is just the amount of units there. It's not, I appreciate what you do, you build beautiful homes. I just feel that a lot of these are likely to end up as rentals simply for the fact that that's one of the things that I do for a living is purchase property and rent it. I own a variety of condos that are similar in nature to this, but I rent currently to other people in Maumee and other places also. But I don't think that's the whether or not this will be a low income or an upscale place. I'm sure it will look very nice if you do decide to proceed forward with this. The one last thing I mentioned, Tom, you made a point about other options or things you can do with the property. It is my understanding that you don't currently own the property, correct? This is contingent. Correct. This is contingent based on this getting approved. So I understand from a business standpoint this is would be a profitable endeavor for you if you could put in this many units. But I think it's worth pointing out that the situation of developing this otherwise or in a less productive manner would not be your business. It would be in this situation, or there would be somebody else proposing that. Yeah.
Does the original owner still own the property?
No.
Okay. The one, not the one who asked for the zoning last time? Okay. Somebody else has it.
Could I make a response
Sure.
to what he just said? He made a good point. I point out that with what Mr. White's proposing, you see what you're going to get. If this isn't approved, as Mr. Creaky said, you don't know what you're going to get. Here you know what you're going to get. And I think that's something that consider.
If I was to rent these, I'm just guessing, but I'm guessing that the cost per month for the rental is going to be more than the majority of your homeowners are paying in the mortgage.
I wouldn't argue that your intention would be to rent these. I think a lot of people that end up.
Guys, we aren't talking about how much money you're going to make, because frankly, I don't care. I mean, I hope everybody prospers in today's economy. Our question is, what do we want to do with this before we send it on to the trustees with a recommendation? Because they, of course, have the final determination in all of this. I guess I'll share my thoughts. I think the thing I look at is, I think there is an overall, and it's reflected in the land use plan, to try to keep that part of McCord more residential in nature. I mean, there is no desire to put any commercial activity in there. So then it becomes a question of the type of residence. And we could sit here and quibble all night whether we should have 4 manufactured homes or 4 houses that could be built under the current zoning, or the project, that's proposed and what that will do. But we do have a proposal in front of us that is similar to something that has been proposed before, that just actually didn't happen because of the economy. It does fit in with the residential nature that we're trying to keep on McCord Road. Seems to be a well-thought-out project. It looks like they've made lots of adjustments and are willing to conform to a lot of the things. And this doesn't mean that I don't recognize your concerns, but my concern is that, the residential piece, that this should be kept residential. We don't want to go back to days of spot zoning and weird little office, projects coming in, somebody coming in and saying, oh, I could build a nice little office building. I'm not sure that's good for people either. So in keeping with the residential, we have a proposal in front of us that maintains that residential neighbor, things that I think we would like on McCord. It is not inconsistent with some of the development that's going on around there, both as you go towards McCord, where you have more of the long condos, or the new development that's going up by Advent. I understand the homeowners' concerns. The particular one, I guess I would note, is that it does on the north side seem to be a little close to the property line. So any comments along those lines? Or anybody have anything additional to add before we move to the motion stage?
I kind of echo your sentiments. Certainly, we understand your concerns and take those into consideration. The tough part about what we're trying to address is we need to make sure that we don't set the rules on the PUDs or the zoning. What we have to make sure is, with that land use plan, which isn't about what's in the past, it's about what the township wants to see going forward, is what we see in front of us, is it in line with that long-term plan. And as long as a project looks like a good project and it fits within the zoning code, that's kind of what our duty is. So not to say we're not listening to the concerns, and certainly understand those. So.
Unless anybody has anything else to offer, I would entertain a motion. If somebody would like to offer one.
I'll make a motion that we approve the proposal as presented to us.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion on the issue? Anybody have any other thoughts they'd like to add? Hearing none, call the roll.
Mr. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mrs. Maline?
Yes.
Mr. Epstein?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. This will then go to the trustees, where there will be an additional hearing. They would then have that option to, take action as they see fit on the project.